Ducati has dominated MotoGP for years, but in Thailand, something interesting happened. Aprilia didn't just win the race, they dominated it. Marc Márquez crossed the line more than 5 seconds ahead of the field, and for the first time in a long time, Ducati wasn't even on the podium. So the question is simple: was Thailand just chaos in one race? Or are we watching the next step in Aprilia's rise in MotoGP? This is MotoGP, The Angle. Hey Don, how you doing, dude?
Yeah, all good, man. What's happening yourself? You're right. So we're going to talk about what? Aprilia winning and Ducati not winning at the moment and all that sort of thing, and then have people on Facebook shout at us again.
Yes, Don, they've been getting quite upset with me when I say Ducati's streak is over.
But what is interesting is a lot of the times, like you say, Ducati's streak is over and Ducati wasn't on the podium. And a lot of people seem to kind of interpret this as Marc Márquez is not on the podium and Marc Márquez's streak is... And they seem to take it so personally. It's like, relax, guys, we're just talking and all of that. But one of the things people kept saying, yeah, relax, it's the first race. It's the first race. You can't tell. It's only the first race. But we can compare it. I mean, remember last year, and we're getting back a little bit to Thailand, about how Marc Márquez and Alex Marquez utterly dominated. Completely and utterly Thailand. So we're not like we're comparing different things. This is apples and apples. And this year, I mean, especially if you want to look at Alex Marquez, I mean, people point out that Marc Márquez was injured. Okay, that's good. Yeah, fine. We'll see. He might improve. But Alex Marquez, I mean, where was he? He was just way down the order and then he crashed. I mean, he crashed while pushing to finish not nearly as high as he did the year before. So I mean, you know, the Ducati crisis looks as though it's going to be real. And as we also pointed out, Ducati's strength still seems to be in its ability to pull out of a corner, whereas, which is very important for Thailand, where its sort of downfall seems to be the ability to carry corner speed, which the other tracks are going to need more of. So if anything, Thailand was a better track for Ducati. But hey, we'll see. But we're not talking about Ducati now. We did that last week. If you didn't see it, go back to just scroll down on the channel and go down to where it says Ducati.
That's right.
There's a picture of Marc Márquez crying. I think that's kind of where people are really upset. Picture, how dare you put Marc Márquez crying? Ah. Anyway, I'm having
Cowboys
a go
don't
at
cry,
Marquez
they
fan.
say.
Come on, guys.
Cowboys don't cry. Hey, dude, when you watch the Thailand race, did it feel like a one-off result, or does it look like Aprilia has generally taken a step forward this season, dude?
Okay, the only thing that can knock this sideways is motorcycle setup. What I'm about to say, I mean, maybe Ducati really set their bikes up for the point and square corners, in which case, you know, that would have affected this. But on TNT, which is very good, Neil Hodgson gave a great little depiction of it was Marquez and Bezzecchi. Marquez was leading, Bezzecchi was second. I think it was during the sprint race before Bezzecchi crashed. And you just watch that Aprilia going through those corners. I mean, that Ducati just seems to struggle to hold a line, and the Aprilia is just absolutely glued to the road. And being glued to the road is not just about carrying corner speed, it's also about being able to carry exit, because it means you can square the corner up way faster, get on the throttle way faster. But here's the thing, and it was actually Pierre Tablanche, you know, the famous Ducati designer, who's a South African like us. But he actually, when I had a chat to him about the difference between Ducati and Aprilia, he was actually saying that the Bologna University, or their university in that area, is well known for engines. So the engineering students spend a lot of time working on engines and motors, which is why Ducati, out of the two, Aprilia and Ducati has been the more horsepower manufacturer. The Nawala University, where Aprilia is made, that has been the kind of, they kind of wrote the textbook on motorcycle frames and motorcycle chassis. And Aprilia has always been renowned for its frames and its sweet handling and all that kind of stuff. So I really think if that's still the case these days, I think a lot of it is just simply down to less in motor and more the sweet handling and the way the two bikes behaved, and the way Bezzecchi was able to hold the line so much better than everybody else, or at least the Ducatis, would suggest that that's where they're sort of going. That's what they've got really right this year.
Yeah, one of the things that's quite interesting is I did a bit of digging into the physics of MotoGP, and I think to understand why this result really matters, I think we have to look at the physics of MotoGP, just to put this in perspective for people that's out there. Maybe they thought of this, maybe they haven't. A modern MotoGP bike produces around 300 horsepower, and their weight limit is 157 kilograms for the bike. So that gives you a power to weight ratio of around 1.9 horsepower per kilogram. Now, comparing that, we just had the Formula One this weekend in Australia. And so I compared it to Formula One. And I mean, everybody knows about Formula One. So a modern Formula One car produces around 1,000 horsepower. But it only weighs, I believe it's 798 kilograms. And that works out to roughly 1.25 versus a 1.9 horsepower per kilogram. So it's 1.25 versus 1.9 on the motorbikes. So as you can see, the MotoGP bikes actually have a better power to weight ratio than a Formula One car. But the crucial difference between the bikes and the cars is obviously the contact patch and obviously the huge aerodynamic downforce. So in MotoGP, 300 horsepower delivered through one rear tire. And that contact patch is roughly the size of a postcard. Now, I've got a postcard here from a friend in Germany, Clocky, a postcard. So that's around the size we have. And I'm going to have to scoot back a little bit here so you guys can actually see. So the contact patch for a MotoGP bike around that size. And I'll have to go back for a Formula... Oh, I've got to go back still, I believe. Oh, my headphones barely making it. 600 mil per tire.
Wow.
Times 2.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's 1.2 meter contact patch versus that much contact patch and a higher power to weight ratio. So, from a rider's perspective, Don, I know you've been on some pretty serious, powerful bikes. I'm not throwing stones, but I don't think you've been on a 300 horsepower MotoGP bike before, but on a race bike that makes a decent amount of power. What do you reckon it's like riding one of those with that amount of power going through a tire?
Well, okay, I have been on a track bike that makes more than 300 horsepower. I rode an H2R, which is 326 horsepower. And it's but it's a lot heavier. You know what I mean? It's a lot heavier, and I'll admit I was not pushing, maybe not quite as hard as a MotoGP rider on that thing. The guy who owned it was a good friend of mine, and it's a very, very expensive motorcycle. So I didn't particularly want to crash it. So, but you are right. I mean, it's some of the things you have to think about are ridiculous. Like when and be over and above contact patch. Contact patch is a huge factor. I mean, those bikes wheel spin down the straights, which is one of the things Top Rack Razgatlioglu was struggling with. He says you come out of a corner on a World Superbike, which already makes a lot of horsepower. You open the throttle, it'll spin a bit out of the corner, but once you get the bike up straight, it'll stabilize and accelerate. He says a MotoGP bike will keep spinning even though it's in a straight line. It's massive. And then over and beyond that, I mean, 300 horsepower doesn't make 300 horsepower most of the time. Even at full throttle, it'll make 300 horsepower in top gear when the throttle's open, and that's it. I remember Brad Binder. By the way, I saw Binder yesterday, actually, over the weekend. We have a thing in South Africa called the DJ Run. It's a ride from Durban to Johannesburg via back roads. It's about 800 kilometers long over 2 days. You have to ride motorcycles older than 1937. Now, Brad's dad, Trevor, Brad and Darren's dad, Trevor, is a big-time classic collector. I think he owned an engineering shop, and he's been quite a connoisseur of classic bikes. And I know Trevor does a lot of the DJ runs. He's he's big in with the classic guys and all of that. And we went along, me and some friends, we went along to go and at the lunch stop, which is about an hour and a half south of Johannesburg. We went there to go and meet them there on the final day, the DJ run, and then go with them back into Johannesburg for the end. And we're at the fueling station right next to where they're having lunch, and all these old people, old timers, grey hair, everything on these old bikes, and they go ka-chunk, 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 and they come riding in, and and you always sort of, oh, hello, very nice, and you look at these really cool old classic bikes, and next thing this guy comes in and lifts his helmet up, and it's bloody Brad Binder. on this old
On a Sunbeam.
1935 Sunbeam going ka-chunk, ka-chunk,
Yeah.
ka-chunk, and he stops there at the petrol like, Brad, what the hell are you doing here? Oh, how's it, bud? You know, and he did the whole thing. So it turns out he
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to come to South Africa, but with all the conflicts from that, it turns out it was an easier flight from Thailand to South Africa, and then from South Africa to Brazil, than trying to go. I think most of them used to go via Qatar or Dubai, and so he ended up in South Africa and had a weekend spare, and his dad was doing the DJ, so he did it with him.
Yeah.
And he and his topi he and his old man were riding together on these old classic motorbikes, going ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. But yeah, it was a bit. And he's such a cool, down to earth guy. I mean, shame when he gets in the crowds, it gets a bit overwhelming, and he sort of has to duck.
Yeah.
But it was quite cool. So it was just sort of a smaller crowd at this lunch stop, and people he'd already spent 2 days with, and he was very chilled out, very relaxed, such a down to earth, easygoing, fun kind of guy. But anyway, I remember getting back to lots and lots of horsepower on a MotoGP bike. What Brad said when he first started riding MotoGP bikes 5 years ago, and I imagine it's slightly worse now. He said that those things will lift the front wheel. It's attempting to lift the front wheel and flip the motorcycle in fifth gear at 300 kilometers per hour. So you want to know what sort of an effect the wings have. At 300 kilometers per hour in fifth gear, top gear, the bike is still trying to flip backwards. So they're not even. And what happens is that the sensors on the bike pick it up and they close the throttle bodies automatically. They'll close the throttle bodies. So even in fifth gear at 300, that bike is not pushing full horsepower. It's not at full butterflies. He said it only gets to full open butterflies in sixth gear. So what they actually end up doing is you'll see the riders will go down the straights and they'll lean a little bit this way, then lean, or vice versa, and then lean just slightly this way. It was a trick Danny Pedrosa taught Binder the first time he ever rode a bike. He said, because you would come out of a corner and you pick the thing up and accelerate, and the wheelie control would just go whoop, 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 and wouldn't accelerate. And he's like, but how do I get this thing to go? Pedrosa said, no, just lean slightly, because when you lean slightly, then it doesn't want to, it actually accelerates slightly better when it's leant over a little bit. But that is the amount. I mean, think about it, 300 kilometers per hour in fifth gear, the bike is still picking up the front wheel and trying to flip it backwards. It's just, and you're right. It's on a contact patch about this much. And don't forget, for the technicians back in the pits, it's even more complicated than that, because Formula One, while they've got like a 1.2 meters worth of contact patch, that contact patch is constant, and the wheel diameter is constant. When the MotoGP bikes lean over, the diameter of the wheel shrinks. It gets lower. So these poor engineers can't just sit there and say, okay, if the back wheel spins this much more, and the bikes and the front wheel lifts and all sorts of things. So they can't just type in, if the back wheel spins this much more than the front wheel, then do this, because it differs every single time, and it differs on how much you're accelerating, and it differs on where. So it's so the electronics and everything that goes into a MotoGP or even the modern road bikes is so complex, and the way they have to make power and the way they have to try and kind of gently kind of massage this bike into, nurture this bike into accelerating forward is so utterly complex and bewildering. It's amazing what they have actually done.
Yeah, and then throwing back to Brad Binder, he does hold the record in MotoGP. In 2023 in Mugello, he did 366.1 kilometers an hour. And on the same Mugello straight, which is 1.1 kilometers long, Formula One car came down there at a top speed of 372 kilometers an hour. So that's 372, 366, 6 kilometers an hour difference between a Formula One car and a MotoGP bike. So as you can see, it's not that much of a difference.
No, it's true, but a lot of that is down to the fact that the Formula One cars will come onto the straight at a hell of a lot of a faster speed, and they brake a lot later. So they got more time. They accelerate from a faster speed and they accelerate for longer. If you go look on YouTube or any of those Red Bull drag races, you'll see that they've got it'll be a MotoGP bike, rally car, Formula One car, and whatever else. The MotoGP bike, for most of it, pulls ahead, and he stays ahead for a long time. If the drag strip is long enough, and if they've taken the aerodynamics of that car and turned it right down, then the car with superior horsepower, then power to weight ratio doesn't matter. Eventually the horsepower will take over. Eventually the car will overtake, but not for a very long time. Those bikes do accelerate. But I mean, you think about it, it would be a drag race if the car was starting at 60 kilometers per hour and the bike was at a standstill. You know what I mean? That's the difference in the drag. So yeah, the cars are faster, but not... only because of the extra cornering speed. That's really it.
Yeah. So Don, looking at these bikes, obviously the KTM is the fastest bike on the grid. So, and in a straight line, obviously. Why doesn't that translate into the race win then?
I think it was Jeremy Burgess who might have said this. I'm not sure, but he was talking about how long you spend on a straight. I mean, the bikes. It was like somebody looked at how long they actually spend at full throttle. You know, and it's not really that much. I mean, and how much time do you spend going down a straight doing high speeds? It's not that much. Famously, in 2004, when Rossi switched over to Yamaha, they had two different engines for him to try. There was the Screamer motor, which makes more power, and then there was that crossplane motor that they famously ended up using. And the crossplane made less horsepower, but Rossi opted for that simply because it was much more controllable. You can get more drive out of the corner. You can control the bike better in the corner. So horsepower is one thing, top speed is one thing, but it's nothing unless, you know, it's only an advantage for a few seconds of a lap, of a say 100-second lap. It's only an advantage for maybe 5-6 seconds. The rest of the time it's up to everything else. So yeah, it's an advantage to have a fast bike, but it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah. So I went and I had a look at, and obviously where it really comes in, as you say, it's not the end all and be all. It is in the cornering forces, isn't it? Now, as we both know, and we've all seen this on TV now, the bikes, the guys lean them over up to, I think, about 65 degrees. And obviously you've got a very small contact patch there. And just out of interest sake, I was wondering what sort of G-forces you'd actually be attaining on one of his MotoGP bikes in full slicks, and it turns out it's between 1.5 and 2 Gs. Now, to put this into perspective, the Corvettes, I don't know if you know, the Corvettes actually are known to put a lot of G-force into the corners. They do about 1.2, and the highest rated car I could find right now for G-forces in a corner is the new 911 GT3 RS, and they say that will generate up to about 2 Gs in a corner, which is equivalent to a MotoGP bike. Just to put this in perspective, I think the Formula 1 cars are up to about 6 times the force of gravity, or 6 Gs, just to put that into perspective. And that's obviously why we see the guys dragging their knees, their elbows, their shoulders, everything on the ground, just to try and get on the inside of that bike. Because I was talking to Craig Shearers the other day, and he says, and I asked him what would be a surprising factor for people sitting on the side. He was like, it's just how physically demanding it is. And from a racer's perspective, you would know this, Don. But if you're not hanging on, that bike would actually flick you out over it, innit?
Well, they had Alex Rins's heart rate. He published his heart rate statistics for the Thailand race, and it had a median of 185. So he averaged 180. And this is Alex Rins, a fit athlete, you know, who full-time athlete who trains, got professional trainers of every sort, you know, to absolutely shape him for MotoGP and train him for MotoGP. His average heart rate for the odd 40-odd minutes of the Thai Grand Prix was 185 beats per minute. It maxed out to 205. I mean, that's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous amount of heart rate. I mean, that for to put it into perspective, that would be sort of most people when they go to the gym would get that while sprinting on the bicycle. So, you know, you got the heart rate monitors. If you're going through a sectional sprint, most of the time you'd keep it somewhere around 140 to 160. Yeah. When you do the sprint, like you actually sprint, like it goes sprint for 1 minute, your heart rate can go up to about 185 if you're really sprinting hard. His stayed at an average really of 185 for 40 minutes. It's unbelievably tough. And the amount of training and the amount of work that those guys put in to stay in ship-sharp shape, And you think about everything. I mean, the braking, they brake so hard on those things. And, your whole body wants to go forward and your whole everything. You're in the corner and you're hanging over the side. You're leaning over the side and the bike is pushing you outwards. The force is actually sending you outwards and you're having to kind of hold on for dear life for this thing and then move yourself this way and then move yourself this way. And while you're going, the bike's trying to kind of fight you and you're trying to push against the handlebars and you're trying to get this to work and you're using your body and you're wrestling the thing. My dad used to describe motorcycle racing, in particular more off-road actually, was like riding on a galloping horse for 45 minutes. And people go, oh, okay, yeah, they've been on a going trot is one thing, but a galloping horse, you can't do that for very long. He says, and I think it's even worse nowadays. The funny thing is, motocross is even, or supercross in particular, is even more strenuous than MotoGP. I don't know what those guys do. They must just be probably robots or something. They're built by Elon Musk.
So from a rider's perspective, Don, when you're going into a corner, what does it actually feel like when you're actually starting to push a bike down right in with suspension? What does that feel like? I'm trying to put to words what a feeling is.
It's tricky because I tell you what, you kind of get used to it. Once you've done enough laps and you start relaxing, you get used to the kind of feeling. But and it depends on sort of the motorcycle. But I mean, you're on the brakes hard, the bike's pushing you forward, and most of the time you're more kind of concentrating on not just what you're doing, but what's coming up next. Because by the time you hit a point, where you need to do something, if you're only deciding or putting into action that there at that point, you're far too late. You're about 2 seconds too late. You've missed it. So you're constantly planning one ahead. Like when you get to the brake marker, by the time you get to your brake marker, you're already looking forward at the corner. You're trying to figure out where you're turning into the corner. And by the time you get to the point, they call it the turn-in point, the point at which you actually turn the bars and tip the bike in. By the time you get there, you're already looking to the apex, the point at which you're closest to the inside of the corner. Before you even get to the apex, you're looking at the exit and you're trying to spot where you're going to roll on, where you're going to stand the bike up. So it's a very strenuous activity mentally. You've got so much going on. And then, as I say, the rest is more a little bit reactive. You start off by going into the corner a bit slower and then kind of getting a feel. Then next lap you go a little bit faster. And mostly when you're turning in, you're feeling the front end. Two things. You're feeling the front and you're watching how the bike reacts and what sort of a radius it can carry. Like sometimes you'll go in and the apex will just disappear that way and you'll sort of go, okay, that wasn't going to work. Or other times you'll turn in and you're heading to the apex fine, but then you feel the front. You actually feel the front tire start kind of collapsing under you. There's a lot of feeling that goes through the bars, and this is all learned stuff you have to learn. You have to hit the floor a few times before you start figuring this out, and which is why off-road's very good, because it kind of gives you that sort of feeling, but at slower speeds, so it doesn't really hurt as much and it's not as expensive. So that's why you'll see a lot of them do, like the Rossi guys do a lot of flat tracking and stuff like that, and it gives you that great feeling more often and at sort of more controllable speed. So you kind of get that feeling, you get it practiced a bit better. But you kind of feel the front, and you can feel the front. It's actually kind of weird because the front tire, before it lets go, unless you're hitting oil or you're on water or it's a very slippery track, you'll feel the tire kind of first almost kind of warp, like it'll kind of give like a bit of a kind of a shaking feedback, and then it lets go, and then you feel the bars do this. And even then, you've got riders, I mean, these top riders will hold it there. They'll hold it at that point where the front is actually wanting to go, and they'll keep it just there, on the very limit. Those are the top racers in the world will do that. For everybody else, at that point, you just kind of give a little bit of throttle, lift a little bit of weight off the front, get the bars up straight, and just sort of correct it. And you hold it just short of that. That's kind of the thing. But again, the whole time, and you're thinking ahead of the next point and the next point, and feeling this and feeling that. And then when you get on the throttle, you feel the rear end. And the rear is a lot easier to save. If the rear starts kicking out, that's fine. You're okay. You can control the rear. The front's a lot more difficult. And then you're just watching where you're going. And now that I'm trying to talk about it, I'm not even giving it like a quarter of the justice it deserves. There really is quite a lot going on, isn't there?
Very quickly, there's a lot of overload happening there. That's why it's one of those things. The more you do it, the better it gets.
And even the top guys, like I know you'll see people like Binder. He often complained about the bike not wanting to stop, and he'll use those words. The bike didn't want to stop, so I couldn't get the bike to stop. And what he is actually saying when he says I couldn't get the bike to stop, he's saying I put on brakes and the front wheel keeps locking up. So, like people who ride motorcycles, normal, sane human beings, when we put on brakes and the front wheel locks, we fall down. Yeah, we do. We hit the floor. When the front wheel locks, you crash. Or it's a really big incident, or you pick up and, you're scared for the rest of the day. It's a big, big incident. They will do it every single corner, every single braking zone. They'll feel the front lock, and then they modulate, like ABS, they modulate the front brake just a little bit. As they feel the front start locking, they kind of release the thing. So when he says the bike won't stop, he means he's constantly locking the front wheel, and therefore he's struggling to stop the bike enough to make the corner, and he can't brake as hard as he wants to because the front's locking. But he says it like casually, like the front blocks, I just can't get the bike to stop, and it's a bit difficult, and it's he's casually describing something that we would crash or we'd have like a life-altering situation, and it is another world.
Brad
it's another world.
is obviously a big hero of ours. He does handle that KTM really well, and he does struggle a little bit in it, but there's just no way I can even imagine getting near anywhere he goes. Let's talk about Aprilia. Aprilia's story in MotoGP has actually been quite a long rebuild. I do remember in the early 2000s they started out with I think it was the Aprilia RS Cube, and they had some real good ideas about that bike, but it didn't really pan out very well, and it was extremely difficult to ride. And the project eventually was abandoned by Aprilia, and we thought they'd be gone. And then they returned in 2015 from memory under Grassini. And then later on, they started building the team. And then obviously in 2019, there was a bit of a breakthrough. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. But their first podium came in 2022 with LA Espargaro delivering Aprilia's first modern MotoGP victory in Argentina. And obviously that was the new RSGP, and it turned into a race-winning machine. When you were watching that, Don, when is the first time you thought this Aprilia can actually start to become a little bit competitive on this bike?
Well, first of all, I remember 2002, the RS Cube was a 3-cylinder motorcycle. But what they made a mistake. They went to Cosworth and they bought a motor. So Cosworth, they pretty much had a triple motor. They designed this initially for a single-seater car. And they bought that and said, okay, we'll adapt it to work in a motorcycle, which doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't as we already stipulated. I mean, the amount of contact patch and downforce on a car is just extraordinary, whereas on a motorcycle it's tiny. So it just, the two do not work. So they had this really, and I remember what it sounded like. It was like a banshee wail. It was magnificent. The thing was brilliant. Yeah. So they had this thing in this motorcycle. They built a chassis around it, but the thing was just an absolute monster. And those poor riders, I remember it was Colin Edwards. His caught fire and at Sachsenring, and he had to jump off. They had Hager on there for a little while, and it was just such a monster. It not only was it a slow down the straight because it was a triple instead of a 4-cylinder, but it just had the way it produced its power, which was meant for cars. It just would come on all at once. And these poor riders were trying to get the bike out of the corner, and it would just wheel spin and buck and buckle and weave, and it was a bit of a disaster. So Aprilia pulled out. Later on, you might remember they introduced those claiming rule teams, the CRT bikes.
That's right.
And those allowed teams to use a road-based engine. So you had like certain teams use an S1000 double R motor. And Aprilia entered with what was at first the RSV4 motor, so the road-going motor with a kind of a chassis built around it. I think it was Grassini at the time. And then later on, the CRTs got scrapped, and Aprilia actually built a motorcycle from the ground up After that, they actually entered. And I remember joking at the time, we were talking about this tiny little manufacturer called Aprilia entering these motorbikes, and we used to joke that they were built in a shed around the back of the behind the back of the scooter production and all of that. And it wasn't really much, but they gradually chipped away until eventually, as you say, Aleix Espargaro took a win. Or took a podium in, as you said, it was 2000 and when was it? 2022.
22 in Argentina.
And it became known as sort of a decent sort of midfield kind of bike. It very, very sweet handling, very, very easy to ride, but not necessarily a race winner. And those were the days when Ducati was just utterly dominating. So it wasn't just the fact that it wasn't just the fact that it wasn't winning. I mean, it was winning in a stage where you had to be on a Ducati to win. And it just became sweet handling and well-known, and it just built up from there. And it's like they just kept chipping away. And this year, so far at least, I mean, as we say, it is still Thailand, although it's looking very promising. They just seem to have found something extra. Over and above that, by the way, I will say this much. There's a video that was put up this week on the MotoGP social media channels. It was Valentino Rossi, and there was a few of them, and I don't know where this was. It was some black tie event. I don't know whether it was a sports dinner or something like that, but they had Danny Pedrosa there, and there was a great conversation between Rossi and Pedrosa about Pedrosa not winning a championship and getting so close so many times. And he was either just taken out or something went wrong. He was taken out by Batista and he fell off in the rain and injured himself. And then there was 2013 where Márquez cut his wheel sensor and he crashed out of there. And he was so close to winning, and just every time somebody was... So anyway, that's just a little sideline. I mean, heads up to big ups to Danny Pedrosa. I mean, it's an injustice that he never won a championship. But Rossi was talking, and I'm not sure who he was talking to. He was talking about Bezzecchi. Now, Bezzecchi is part of the VR46 Academy, so along with riders like Morbidelli and Bagnaia and a bunch of others, De Gianantonio. And Rossi was talking about Bezzecchi being very in form at the moment, very in form. And he was saying even at the ranch, when they're all just the VR46 riders training, at the enduro track, practicing on the practice tracks and stuff like that. He was saying that Bezzecchi's working harder, he's training harder, he's setting faster times. He seems to be very, very focused right now. So I mean, over and above Aprilia just having a great package this year, they've got a rider who just seems so utterly dominated, so utterly just so utterly dedicated at the moment. And that maybe says something. And they come at the right time when Márquez is a bit injured, so he obviously hasn't put the focus in that he could. And maybe he just sees this is his shot. He's got a bike that really works this year. This is his shot. He wants to win a world championship, and he's pushing hard, and he's very hungry for it. And that's a big worry for everyone else.
Yeah, I think the thing with Bez is obviously he wasn't the number one rider going into the Aprilia team last season. Came out of the VR46 team. But he had the potential there. And then obviously we had the whole thing of Jorge getting injured, and he had to step up. And he's absolutely blossomed in that. He's stepped up to the role, and he's just going so well. And I think he's just tasted that victory, and the team and him is just gelling really well. And like you say, he's hungry for it now. And man, it's exciting racing. It's so exciting. The guy was ahead. If he didn't fall off in the sprint race in Thailand, who knows, he would have had the double there. Talking about Aprilia's progress, though, no great team gets there without a great manager. Last week we spoke about Gigi Deling, and this week I think we have to mention in 2019 Massimo Rivola joined from Ferrari's Formula One program, and instead of chasing short-term results, he focused on rebuilding the organization, expanding engineering resources, and strengthening the development, and building a long-term strategy around the RSGP. How important, in your opinion, Don, was Rivola's leadership in building this competitive racing team?
It's all down to the results, isn't it? And as I say, Aprilia just kept chipping away, getting better and better and better. They're not the biggest team on the grid. I mean, you look at Ducati with the might of VW behind them and all the sponsors. You've got the big boys at Yamaha and Honda, the big Japanese guys. Aprilia is a small team comparatively. They really are. And it just seems that, a small team like that, just chipping away, being dedicated, it does eventually bring out results. One of the things about being a team manager like that is it's not just about being an engineer. For example, Gigi Dall'Igna, when he joined Ducati, one of the things he said is there's a communication problem between the factory engineers and the team at the track. And he actually forced the engineers from the factory to attend a certain amount of races and sit in the pit. So when the team tells the engineers, hey, listen, the bike's doing this or we're having this problem, the engineers can't say, well, we're looking at our data and according to our data. No, sit there in the pit box, tell these team members and tell that rider that according to the data, he's wrong, and just look how stupid you look. So there was a lot better flow of communication between the different, between the teams and the actual engineers. And again, so being the chief engineer and being the manager like that, it's all about, well, it's kind of like running a successful business. It's all about resource allocation and communication and all that kind of thing. And it's putting the right emphasis on the correct things. And just slowly building it up. Let the different departments talk to each other. What's the motor department doing? What's the chassis department? How are they working together? Are they going for this? Are they striving for the same goals? Is everyone's vision in alignment? Is everyone going to work? Is it all going to gel together? Does the team sitting at the track, remember that the technicians working at the track are not the same as the engineers. Are they gelled in with what's going on? What is the feedback like? What are the ultimate plans? What are the goals? It's managing all of that, all these different personnel, putting the right person at the right time, the right budget, the right schedule, the right time allocation, all that kind of thing, putting it all together. And again, it's like being a CEO of a tech company. I mean, Elon Musk gets a lot of flack because people say, well, he's not an engineer, he's not responsible for SpaceX, and he's not, but he was the big boss in charge. He's the guy who found the correct engineers, put the correct engineers in the correct place, the correct amount of budget, correct amount of time allocation, the correct direction, got them all communicating. And now SpaceX is by far the biggest space company and slowly rising to become one of the most successful companies in the world. And it's all the same thing. You've got to have a good manager. If you don't put a good manager there, running the thing properly, putting everyone in the right place, doing all the right things. I mean, even if you got the best engineers in the world, if they're not working together and they're not doing the right thing and they don't have the right resources allocated to them, it doesn't work. So Massimo Rivola, big ups to him. And him coming from Formula One's important because the Formula One teams are a lot bigger. The infrastructure around them is a lot bigger. There's a lot more to manage. There's a lot more to look after, a lot more to coordinate. So for him to move from a Formula One team to a MotoGP team, in fact, it is a bit of a downscale. I mean, I'm not sure of his total role at Ferrari, but having had to manage all of that in a Formula One team, going to a MotoGP team is relatively easy comparatively, and especially when you look at like the aero stuff. I mean, he joined just in time for the whole aero revolution, so he again knew exactly where to put people for those aero things. And you look at it now, I think Aprilia, especially with their latest innovation, I think they're at the moment leading the way in aero innovation. So obviously it has all worked.
I think you're making a very good point there, Don. And I'm just going to throw this back onto Marc Márquez. And for a long time, Honda has been known to be very strict and very rigid in their structure. And obviously, I mean, we all know Marc wasn't winning on that Honda and then obviously left for Ducati. And I do believe it is because of Gigi Dall'Igna in there, where there is a faster adaptation from the racing side to the engineers, and they can develop and work with the guys better. And it seems now that Marc's gone, Honda has actually taken lead, because last year they started to change their management as well. But just throwing forward to that little tidbit you threw in there, obviously the aerodynamics is really changing, and at the Thailand MotoGP, we did see these new fairing vents around the rider's elbows. And they say these vents help to manage pressure inside the fairings, and improve aerodynamic stability. And obviously all these small changes help. Like you say, every little bit helps and makes a big difference in the end of the day. How big a role do you think, Don, these smaller changes are playing when we compare the Aprilia straight line speed in the Thailand GP versus the Ducatis?
Well, think of about a race length. It's 25 to 30 laps. If it made a small difference, 0.1 of a second a lap, he is at the end of the race. The rider will be 2.5 to 3 seconds ahead of the next rider. And you think of the difference. I mean, 3 seconds. I mean, look at the gap. Look at a 3-second gap between riders. It's big. You know what I mean? If a rider beats another rider by 3 seconds at the end of the race, you can say he beat him easily. It was an easy win. You know what I mean? So if that error made 0.1 of a difference, that's the difference between dicing with the other rider for the win and beating the other rider easily. That arrow it's interesting. So the top of the fairing, they got these little sort of look like rubber slits, and the elbows of the rider cover them down the straight, so that it directs the air along the fairing and down, makes it more streamlined. But when they sit up to brakes, it directs the air upwards out. So it creates more of a barrier that it's a more aerodynamic resistance. So it helps braking when you're braking, and it helps them streamline it better when you're going down the straight. So it's a little bit like a wing on a Formula One car, flattening down the straight and then going sort of vertical on the braking. It's a similar kind of thing. So it will make a difference. How much, I don't know. It is very, very small differences. I remember Binder again, because, well, I kind of talked to Binder more than everybody else. I mean, he went out in one of the Sepang tests a few years ago, and they tried a new aero that didn't have the downforce that the other aeros had. And he actually said when he went out, he can immediately feel the bike just wants to wheelie everywhere. You know, you could feel like the front wheel just keeps wanting to lift the whole time, and they were struggling to keep that. And he said he did a few laps, so he pulled straight in, and he just said, no, that's not going to work. They put the other aero back on, and then suddenly the bike felt a lot more stable. You know, they could pull. You look at Márquez, he's running the 2024 aerodynamic package, not the 2020, whether it's 5 or 6, I don't know. But he said the 2024 aerodynamic package is easier to ride with a sore shoulder than the modern one. And that's true because the more sort of aerodynamic effects it has, the harder the bike is to turn. So definitely, you know, and it's enough of a difference for a rider to say, well, my shoulder's sore, let me rather ride that one than this one, if you know what I mean. So it definitely plays a role. It definitely makes a difference. We kind of felt it ourselves very recently. In fact, on Friday we went to the track with that new KTM 990 RCR. You know, they got that new 990 parallel twin superbike. It has aero based on the MotoGP bike. So it's got the big wings out of the kind of front. It's got kind of halfway down the fairing, it's got those other kind of ducks. And then by the back wheel, it's got that scoop, that aerodynamic scoop. And I will tell you something, when you're at the end of the straight, going flat out, the bike does feel stable, extra stable. And we had another friend of mine, his name's Jason Vessels. He's been a veteran racer for years. And ridden on that track, he based at that track, rides there every single week. And he also commented on how absolutely stable the bike felt when he got to the end of the straight, you know, and you put on brakes, and the bike just feels so kind of locked in and set up and ready to go. And that's at speeds at like low 200 kilometers per hour with us riding. For a MotoGP bike doing 300 and plenty, you can just imagine the difference that makes. So, I mean, I would say that if we feel a bit of a difference, you know, and our kind of low-key riding, I can just imagine the difference they feel. Clearly it makes a difference. Clearly.
Absolutely. Now, just throwing back to, obviously, I mean, we've only had the Chang International at Buriram this year, and that track specifically, it's got two long straights, thinking about it, which obviously that creates some heavy braking. I mean, it's really a stop-and-go corners, and that, as we know, it is really hot out there, and you spoke about it last week, saying that the tires get really hot, so they've got a harder compound carcass on there, but traditionally, Aprilia has not done very well. That track was a Ducati track. Ducati's always dominated there. So just looking back at it, I went down and had a look. Over the years of progression, 2018, Aprilia came in 11th. 2019, they came in 9th. 2022, they were back to 11th. And 23, they were 5th. This year, Aprilia crossed that line of Bears 5 seconds ahead. They had number 3 and number 4 on the podiums this year. Looking at what happened there, Ducati's obviously got a lot of depth in that factory garage there. But looking at what we saw there, do you think Aprilia might actually have a realistic challenge this season?
If we look at the way when Márquez and Bezzecchi were riding together, and how much more easily Bezzecchi can hold a line. And this was not through the stop-go corners. So Thailand has 3 tight stop-go corners where the riders are, I think, in first gear. So they come to a near standstill, then accelerate at very low speed, low gear onto. So it's two long straights and 1 kind of medium straight. But there's 3 places where you got to almost stop and accelerate. This was not through there. This was through the kind of infield, the flowing section of the track. And the Aprilia just seemed to be able to hold a line so much easier than that Ducati. I mean, it just looked like Márquez was in the way of Bezzecchi. It's just, it's what it looked like. Now we're heading to, for example, so this weekend we're heading to Brazil. They got a new circuit. It's that Senna circuit. And it's going to be an interesting layout, but it's a very short circuit. So it's 3.8 kilometers long. Most circuits on the calendar are between 4 and 5 kilometers. So it's a shorter circuit. There's still 12 corners. So it has the same number of corners as the other tracks, but over a shorter distance. So it is tight. It is a very, very tight circuit. Some of the test teams went there just to get a bit of a feel of the place. And they were saying overtaking is going to be a big problem. There's not a lot of hard braking zone. There's a few good medium pace corners. More importantly, there's a lot of medium pace corners onto straights. So it's very good news for the likes of Acosta, who didn't have the sort of drive out of corners that the Ducati had, but could carry more speed. So that's that'll be very good news for him. If the Aprilia can carry on holding a line better than Ducati, it will be better at a circuit like this. It definitely will be. In fact, that this circuit reminds me of the old Albicetti that the World Superbikes, I think they used to race. I don't think they race here anymore. But it's a very similar kind of layout. So much shorter, very, very short little straights between the corners and these sort of medium-paced, tightish corners. But it's also going to be a very demanding track. So the guys don't have a lot of time to get down on a straight and breathe for a little while and, get their head right. It's just going to be corner, corner, corner. So very physically demanding. Maybe demanding on tires. There's not a lot of very, very hard sort of corners. A little bit on the kind of the right-hand side, maybe a little bit. There's 4 quite fast right-handers where the guys spend a lot of time on the side of the track. But I don't think it's going to be particularly hard on tires. And I do think qualifying is going to be important because, if you can get out front, it's going to be difficult for the guys to stay behind you. But if Aprilia carries on and is able to hold their line so much better than the Ducati, like we saw at Thailand, then I think Aprilia is going to be the bike to beat. I think Acosta on the KTM will have a better time than he will at Thailand because there's no point and square corners there. It's more of a flowing track, and Acosta seemed to be better at flowing than he did at point and squirt. Ducati, unless they can do some big setup changes, and as I say, it's possible that Ducati set their bikes up for those 3 point and square corners, and they set it up for drive out of those corners, and maybe they just got it wrong. So it's possible that they'll find a completely different setup that will work on these other tracks, in which case we might see a totally different thing. But if things stay the same, if the status quo at Thailand stays as is, then I think Ducati's going to have a harder time and Aprilia's going to have a better time.
Whichever way, Don, I think with Aprilia in the mix there, and Pedro Acosta, he smelled blood in the water, and he is known as the shark out there. I reckon Pedro Acosta's out there, he's coming for it, and it makes it exciting racing for us, doesn't it?
Again, my favorite thing, okay, like last year, we kind of went into every race thinking, do you think this will be the race someone will beat Marc Márquez,
Hoping,
so there's like a little bit of a kind of, will someone beat Marc Márquez? And the answer was usually not, probably not, no. Yeah. Now we're going into this race saying, I think Bezzecchi's the favorite. Personally, I think he's the favorite, but I'm not sure. I can't, if I had to put money on who's going to win this race, it would be tricky. You'd kind of have to look at it and go, I think now my money's on Bezzecchi, but it's like, it's not, it's not 90%. It's not even like, it's maybe like 60%, if you know what I mean. Because beginning of the season, we're not sure. But I think after Brazil, we'll have a far better sort of understanding of where the championship's going, on who's doing what. But for now, unless something changes between now and then, I think Aprilia has the advantage.
Yeah, and I do think that obviously Rahul, he's got some potential actually to bring another fight back there and get another podium. And I've still got Ayogura pinned for a podium at least this season. And Furman Aldeguer is also going to come back into the mix. And Jorge seems to be going well on that Aprilia, and we've already discussed that Aprilia seems to be a strong package. I think Jorge is going to be in the mix, and heaven forbid that Pecco Bagnaia might just come in and get on a podium.
Gian Antonio also, he said he had a problem with his bike at Thailand. He was also quite up there, so let's not discount him also. I mean, very talented rider, and this all depends on where the Ducati is. And we'll also get a better understanding of where Ducati is in terms of its kind of rideability among all the bikes. If the Gian Antonio really did have a technical problem with his bike, it'll be interesting to see how close he's going to be with Márquez. And Fermin Aldeguer, I think it's his first race back. He's missed all the practice. He's missed everything. He's going to take a while to get back in the groove again. But we'll see. But then again, I mean, Jorge Martin arrived, and he was able to kind of get quite fast, quite quickly. So let's see. I mean, but it'll be interesting. I don't think Aldeguer will be quite there this race, but in the future, let's see. I'm more interested to see how close DG can get to the likes of Márquez, and also, as you said, Bagnaia. Maybe something great will happen there.
Yeah, we can always hope. I mean, obviously, I'm going to predict, and I'm going to put myself out there a little bit, and I'm wishful thinking most probably, but I'm predicting that Toprak is going to go faster than Quartararo in Brazil.
Okay, I won't quite say that. No, the two rookies, which is Diego Moreira and also the other Diogo. It's not Diego, it's Diogo. Moreira and Toprak, they've got a bit of an advantage at Brazil in that everybody's going there on a clean slate. None of the riders have ridden that track before. Whereas Thailand, okay, well then again, I suppose Diogo had ridden there on the Moto2 bikes. Toprak especially had never really ridden at Thailand. It was sort of a new track. He did get some testing beforehand, but here they're going to a brand new circuit that no one's ridden on. So I think Toprak might be in a slightly better place in Brazil, or more better setup. I think he'll bother Miller and Rins. He was quite close to them at Thailand. If he can get everything working, if he can figure out that time, I do think he will get faster. I think Quartararo is a bit of a stretch. If he does, I'll say, well done to the guy. I mean, if he finishes top Yamaha, can you imagine? Wow, that would be interesting. It'll put a giant spanner in the works for poor Quartararo. I think he's bidding to go to somewhere else next year, kind of depicting himself as top Yamaha. But I do think Rins and Miller might be in a spot to bother from Toprak. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey Don, as always, it's absolutely fun talking to you about MotoGP on a weekly basis, and I look forward to chatting to you next week again.
Oh man, it's so much fun. And next week we're going to be speaking about Brazil, a brand new race, a brand new happenings. It's going to be jolly good fun. I look forward to it, mate.
I do look forward to Brazil and seeing those results, and we'll obviously do a catch-up beforehand again. Guys, if you do like what we're doing on the channel, please click and subscribe, and don't be scared to leave us comments for us in the comment section. And we are seeing you guys in Indonesia. You are supporting us, and we do appreciate it. Until next time, keep the rubber side down.